closer in the courtroom. The questioning is going a bit more smoothly this afternoon after a series of highly volatile moments earlier in the day, including while talking about the valuations of Trump properties. Donald Trump told the court he thinks that Mar-a-Lago, Doral, 40 Wall Street, all were actually underestimated. But he did admit that the estimate for his Manhattan apartment in Trump Tower was too high. I want to bring in someone who led the construction on Trump Tower, former executive vice president of the Trump Organization, Barbara Rez. It's good to see you, Barbara.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Is it possible to think that Donald Trump's apartment is 30,000 square feet and not 10,000 square feet?
I don't think the building's big enough for that to be 30,000 square feet on 3 floors. No, it's nothing like that when I built it, and I don't think it's changed.
So when you hear things from him on the stand, including the admission today, he thought that property was overvalued when he looked at it, and yet the statement that went in was overvalue. Tell us what your thought is, as you know the way that this is all playing out, which is the judge has already said fraud was committed.
I'm not sure what you mean by overvalued. What was he saying was overvalued?
So he admitted that the statement that they made about the price tag could potentially be more than it was worth. But on most of the properties, he said, including Mar-a-Lago, they were undervalued. And he said one of the things that was key is that you have to add in the value of the Trump name.
I think that anyone would doing evaluation, any appraiser or a professional, if they thought, if it was real that the Trump name gave value to the property, they would include it. In New York City, there was Trump apartments, and the people that lived in the apartments had the signs removed. They didn't want the Trump name. And whether the Trump name has any value here is questionable. Probably has value overseas, maybe in Saudi Arabia or Russia or something like that. But as far as overvaluing, I think I read something and he said, well, they may have been overvalued at the time that the numbers were put on the papers, but now with today's values, that was undervalued at the time. He'll say anything. He'll say anything to try to make a ridiculous point. Someone will believe him. That's what he's relying on.
Well, our producer in court today actually said that at one point the former president had, quote, no restraint, that he absolutely lost control and let loose. A lot of the confrontation was directed toward the judge, who, of course, will decide his company fate. You've said in the past that he absolutely believed he was above the law. Do you think that's what we're seeing here? Does it surprise you at all that Donald Trump would be so confrontational toward the person who could decide the future of his company in New York State?
No, it doesn't surprise me. I'm sure his attorneys warned him beforehand, because I've been in this situation where attorneys have said, don't do this or do that, and Trump just ignored it. And I hear now when he went back in that he was a little calmer, but I don't know how long that'll last. He believes that he has the right to do anything, and he thinks that, if he says something, the judge is prejudiced, then he all of a sudden believes it. And he keeps saying it and trying to make other people believe it. And that's, his basis. Even if he wasn't convinced of that, he needs to keep saying it because his people are listening. And that's what it's all about, holding on to the people that, supposedly are following him, which he claims is, more than half the population.
You've spent more time around Donald Trump, the businessman, than most people. What would it mean to him if he were not able to operate his business the way it's operated now, if he were not able to run the Trump business out of New York ever again?
Initially, I thought, and I still think that he would not be happy about that, would be very unhappy about it. But, he moved to Florida. He was living in Trump Town when he moved to Florida. The business he does now, mostly licensing, really doesn't need a New York presence. And I think that if he were to have to leave New York, he would spin it so that he made that decision that the rules in New York are too tough or blah, blah, blah. But if he does any building in the future, it'll probably be out of the country. So I don't know that needing a New York office is so important, but it is a big scar. It's a terrible blow to him to have to lose his business.
Barbara Rez, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for taking the time. Appreciate it. We are just